Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. August 22nd, The Glow. Story 1. Sanbō Kōjin and the Fire That Learned to Stay. Some sacred fires split mountains, consume monsters, or descend from heaven. Sanbō Kōjin belongs to another kind of flame, the one who waits in the kitchen. His name joins Sanbō, the three treasures of Buddhism, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, Kōjin, a term meaning a fierce or rough deity. In Japanese tradition, Sanbō Kōjin developed as a distinctly Japanese Buddhist protective figure, often represented with a terrifying face and multiple heads and arms, a guardian whose ferocity stood against impurity and harmful forces. Yet over centuries, something remarkable happened to this fierce protector. He came home. Sanbō Kōjin became intertwined with older Japanese beliefs surrounding Kamado Gani, the kami of the cooking stove and hearth, until Kōjin himself became widely revered as the guardian of the kitchen fire. In the Osaka and Kyoto regions in particular, the hearth deity became known as Kōjin. The place entrusted to him could hardly have been more ordinary. The kamado was the cooking stove, the place where grain became food and where the controlled flame returned day after day. But precisely because fire was necessary, it demanded respect. The same force capable of preparing a family's meal could escape its boundaries and destroy the home around it. Japanese hearth traditions therefore treated the place where fire was tended as sacred space, with household altars, amulets, offerings, purification practices, and taboos developed around the fire kami. The hearth deity could become more than guardian of the flame, taking on responsibility for food, agriculture, children, livestock, prosperity, and ultimately the household itself. Sanbō Kōjin fit perfectly into that world because his fierceness did not have to disappear when he entered the kitchen. It changed purpose. The rough deity became the one whose formidable power could guard the vulnerable center of everyday life. His association with purity also mattered deeply. The hearth was expected to be treated carefully. The traditions surrounding Kōjin warned against disrespecting or polluting it. Some beliefs described Kōjin as easily provoked when slighted. Yet precisely because his power was formidable, he was also called upon to protect homes from fire and disaster. There is a beautiful contradiction inside him. His imagery can be wrathful, but his fire does not need to rage. His sacred place is where someone cooks rice, where hands prepare a meal, where yesterday's ashes are cleared and today's flame is kindled, where the same small fire may be tended hundreds or thousands of times until it becomes part of the rhythm of a family's life. This is a fire after the spectacle is ended. It does not need an army watching it. It does not need to burn a city to prove that it possesses power. It survives because someone remembers it, respects it, feeds it, cleans the place around it, and returns tomorrow. Sanbō Kōjin therefore gives the glow its first kind of quiet strength. Not the fire powerful enough to consume everything around it, but the fire powerful enough to remain exactly where it is needed. The great blaze may illuminate an entire horizon for one extraordinary night. The hearth illuminates a life. Story 2. Brigid and the Flame That Was Never Left Alone. At Kildare in Ireland, a fire became famous not because it erupted across a battlefield or swallowed a forest, but because it was kept. The flame was associated with Brigid, one of Ireland's most beloved sacred figures, whose traditions stand at the meeting place between earlier Irish reverence for the goddess Brigid and the later Christian saint known as Saint Brigid of Kildare. By the medieval period, Kildare had become an important religious center connected with a community of women, and written accounts describe a perpetual sacred fire maintained there in Brigid's honor. One of the most memorable traditions says that 19 women tended the flame in rotation, each taking responsibility for a night, while on the 20th night the fire was left for Brigid herself. The detail is almost impossibly perfect for the kind of power the flame came to represent. 19 nights depended upon human hands. The 20th depended upon trust. The fire was not valuable because it was enormous. Its significance came from continuity, from being passed from one keeper to the next without being allowed to vanish. Medieval writers described the flame at Kildare with awe, and later traditions surrounded it with sacred boundaries and stories of protection. The fire became inseparable from Brigid's wider identity, which included associations with healing, poetry, hospitality, livestock, fertility, craftsmanship, and care for the vulnerable. Even her name seemed to gather different forms of warmth around it. The warmth of the hearth, the warmth of creative inspiration, the warmth of hospitality offered to someone in need. The Kildare flame gave those qualities a physical center. Someone had to rise and tend it. Someone had to notice when fuel was low. Someone had to protect the ember that would become the next night's fire. This kind of sacred responsibility is almost invisible compared with heroic mythology. There is no monster to defeat and no kingdom to conquer. The danger is simpler: neglect. The fire can die quietly. That is precisely why tending it matters. The Kildare tradition survived centuries of political, religious, and cultural change, although the historical flame itself was eventually extinguished. Yet the story did not disappear with it. In the modern era, Brigidine's sisters at Kildare rekindled the flame in Brigid's honor, carrying the old image of guardianship into a new time. What survived was not one uninterrupted physical ember burning untouched across 15 centuries. What survived was a responsibility to remember the fire and light it again. Brigid's flame therefore carries a form of quiet power that is easy to underestimate. Roaring fires command attention because they can destroy everything nearby. A tended flame asks for something harder: patience, repetition, memory, and care. Its strength is measured not in how high it rises, but in how long people remain willing to protect it. The old tradition at Kildare imagined sacred fire as something never truly alone. On 19 nights, a woman kept watch. On the 20th, Brigid did. Story 3. The sacred fire at the center of the Ger. At the center of the Mongolian Ger, the round felt dwelling known elsewhere as the yurt. Fire has long been more than warmth. It cooks food, heats the home through bitter winters, lights the interior after sunset, and marks the living center of a space built around family, movement, and continuity. Mongolian traditional beliefs treat the hearth with profound respect. Older religious traditions speak of a sacred fire spirit or fire mother, often described through names such as Golej, mother fire, or related forms found across Mongolic and neighboring Inner Asian traditions. The hearth was not something to insult casually. One did not spit into it, throw filth into it, or treat it as ordinary waste fire. The flame belonged to the household and carried a presence of its own. In ritual life, offerings could be given directly to the fire. Small portions of fat, milk, butter, tea, or other valued foods placed into the flame so that the household's gratitude and requests rose with the smoke. During important transitions, the hearth could become a place where continuity itself was acknowledged. Marriage created a new household, and a new household required its own fire. Guests entering a ger encountered the hearth almost immediately because there is no hiding the center of a circular dwelling. The fire sits where everyone can see it, dividing and organizing the space around itself. Its position teaches something without speaking. Life gathers here. Food comes from here. Warmth comes from here. people return here. Even when the family traveled and the ger was dismantled, packed, moved, and raised again somewhere else, the idea of the hearth traveled with them. A home did not depend upon stone foundations. It could be rebuilt across the steep, and once the stone or hearth was lit again, warmth restored the center. Mongolian traditions surrounding fire therefore emphasize not spectacle but continuity. A bonfire might blaze brilliantly for one night, but the household flame had to survive ordinary days, storms, moves, winters, births, meals, arguments, visits, and everything else that accumulated around a family. Fire could also become part of purification and blessing practices, especially in broader Mongolian religious worlds shaped by ancient shamanic traditions and later Buddhism. Smoke, flame, offerings, and the honoring of local or household spirits could exist alongside one another rather than belonging to a single rigid system. What mattered was the relationship. The hearth was powerful because it was repeatedly acknowledged. It was fed, protected, kept clean, returned to. Within that quiet rhythm, the flame became almost like another member of the household, never demanding to roar in order to prove that it mattered. The ger itself might stand beneath an enormous sky, surrounded by miles of open grassland and cold wind, but inside, one controlled flame could change the entire meaning of the space. It turned shelter into home. It turned ingredients into food. It gathered people into a circle, and when the fire burned low, someone added fuel before the last ember disappeared. Not because the flame needed to become enormous, but because some forms of power are measured simply by whether they are still there when morning comes. Story 4. Maasaw and the fire kept for the people. Among the Hopi, the figure often rendered in English as Maasaw, or Maasaw, belongs to a sacred world of emergence, land, death, responsibility, and survival. He is not simply a fire god, and Hopi traditions surrounding him are far richer than that label would suggest. But fire is part of the authority he carries. In publicly shared Hopi narratives, Maasaw appears as a powerful guardian connected with the earth and with the difficult work of learning how to live upon it. One well-known cycle tells of the ancestors emerging into the present world and encountering Maasaw, who does not greet them with comfort or abundance. Instead, he confronts them with conditions. This world will require humility, labor, restraint, and respect. According to versions of the story, Maasaw possesses a planting stick, seeds, and fire, and these simple things reveal what life will actually demand. There will be no effortless kingdom waiting. People will have to plant, tend, build, endure heat and cold, and learn how to live within the limits of the land. Fire therefore becomes part of a larger teaching about continuity. A flame can cook food, provide warmth, and protect a household, but it only survives if someone tends it. Seeds can become crops, but only if they are planted and cared for. A home can shelter a family, but only if people keep returning to the work that sustains it. Maasaw's presence is often described as stern, even fearsome, because he represents a form of guardianship that does not flatter. He does not promise that life will be easy. He asks whether people are willing to live carefully enough to remain in relationship with the world they have entered. In some traditions, Maasaw is associated with the first fire or with the keeping of fire, making him an especially powerful figure for a day devoted to quiet strength. The flame connected with him is not the fire of spectacle. It is the fire that must last through winter, through ordinary meals, through ceremony, through nights when nothing dramatic happens at all. That kind of fire survives because somebody remembers it. Somebody protects the embers. Somebody knows when to add fuel and when to leave the flame alone. The Hopi world in which Maasaw appears is one where survival depends upon attention, not domination. The land cannot be forced indefinitely. The seed cannot be shouted into growing. The fire cannot be neglected and expected to remain. Power is measured by relationship and endurance. Maasaw's fire therefore carries the same quiet severity as the figure himself. It is useful, necessary, and never casual. It belongs to the people only insofar as they are willing to care for what has been entrusted to them. The flame does not need to roar across the desert to prove that it matters. It matters because someone wakes in the morning and finds that it is still there. Daily thread for August 22nd. What still glows? After all this fire, perhaps we have been looking for strength in the wrong place. We have watched flames descend from heaven, cities burn, gods rage, forests regenerate, metal enter the forge, lies collapse beneath reckoning, and iron harden beneath the hammer. Yesterday we asked how difficulty had made us stronger, but eventually the hammer stops, the furnace cools, the battlefield becomes quiet. And when all that noise disappears, another question waits in the darkness. What still glows? Today's fires are smaller. They do not need to conquer anything. Sanbō Kōjin brings us into the Japanese hearth where sacred fire lives upon a battlefield, where sacred fire lives not upon a battlefield, but beside the preparation of food, protected because something as ordinary as cooking can become the center around which an entire household survives. The flame matters because someone returns to it. Someone keeps its place clean. Someone feeds it. Someone understands that controlled fire does not become less powerful simply because it has learned where to remain. At Kildare, Brigid's flame gives us an even more delicate image. 19 keepers tending the sacred fire in rotation, while tradition imagined Brigid herself keeping watch on the 20th night. No single woman was required to guard the flame forever. Each simply protected it long enough to pass it onward. And even when the historical fire eventually went dark, people remembered it strongly enough to kindle it again centuries later. Sometimes continuity is knowing how to relight what matters. In the Mongolian Hearth, the hearth occupies the center because ordinary life gathers around it. A family can dismantle its dwelling, cross the steep, raise the walls beneath another enormous sky, and create the center again when the fire is lit. Home is not always the place that never changes. Sometimes home is the warmth we know how to carry with us. And Maasaw brings us to a quieter, sterner fire, the kind entrusted rather than possessed. Fire must be cared for, seeds must be planted, land must be respected. Survival depends upon returning to small responsibilities long after the novelty has disappeared. None of these fires needs to become an inferno. Their victory is endurance. Maybe ours is too. We spend so much time measuring ourselves by intensity. We think passion should feel enormous. Purpose should feel electrifying. Love should always burn hot. Creativity should arrive in floods. Spirituality should produce revelation. And healing should announce itself through dramatic transformation. When those feelings quiet down, we sometimes assume we have lost them. But a roaring flame consumes fuel quickly. An ember works differently. An ember can look almost dead until someone moves the ash and discovers the red beneath it. So ask yourself today, what still glows? After disappointment, what do you still care about? After exhaustion, what idea keeps returning? After everything you have learned about people, what kindness have you refused to surrender? After the plans that failed, what dream still refuses to disappear completely? What relationship still feels warm when the rest of the world becomes noisy? What part of yourself survived every attempt, including your own, to convince you that it was time to give up? Maybe it is creativity, curiosity, faith, humor, love, anger that became a boundary, hope that became quieter, but more durable. Maybe it is simply the strange little certainty that there is still something ahead worth meeting. You do not have to turn that ember into a bonfire today. In fact, perhaps today's practice is the opposite. Protect it, give it a little air, add only enough fuel for what it needs next. The world teaches us to display everything, enlarge everything, monetize everything, prove everything. But some things become stronger while they are being quietly tended. A dream does not become less real because nobody applauds it. Healing does not disappear because nobody can see it. Love does not become meaningless because it has grown comfortable. And you do not become powerless because your strength no longer needs to announce itself. After everything this month has burned away, transformed, exposed, and hardened, look beneath the ash. Something is still warm. Whatever it is, perhaps that is the part of you worth tending now. Not every fire is meant to consume the world. Some fires have a quieter purpose, to remain alive long enough to lead us into tomorrow.